You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast. Today's episode will be a part of our People Leader series, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at and what they really do every day. Hope you enjoy. MPL family, stop what you're doing and take 5 seconds to go subscribe to the MPL Weekly Digest. Every week, we'll share the top 3 takeaways from the episode along with the full transcript. Just go to the show notes for this episode and click the link to subscribe. And now, without further ado, enjoy the show. Jodie, happy Friday. Thanks for joining us.
Happy Friday to you too.
How's the week going?
Well, first of all, it's Friday, so can't really complain. And it was Halloween, so at primary, that's like a big celebration for us. So we were just kind of having fun all week.
Did you wear a costume?
You know, I wore a costume last week because it was our all hands meeting.
And can you share what was
You
the
know, it's going to not make a lot of sense. We're going through
I love those costumes.
It's always a great start.
We are going through a certification process through the Global Organic Trade certification process called GOTS. And it's an attestment to the quality of the organic cotton that we use, but also to our kind of commitments to sustainability as a company. So we're in the middle of this whole process, which has just added a few projects to my plate. And I promised the audit team that I was going to dress up as GOTS organic cotton. So I kind of ran out of time. I was gonna like make a whole hat with like cotton balls stuck onto it, but it ended up just being a hat with like a puffy ball on it and a matching shirt. So it was like funny in context, but not very funny to describe.
Those are always the best costumes whenever it's a bit that like nobody would understand unless they had like all of the context, but those are the best because I'm sure they loved it.
It was very contextually appropriate and with the exact amount of effort that I had to devote to Halloween this year.
Yeah.
Daniel, where did you end up? Because you were on the fence the last time we talked about Halloween.
I didn't dress up. It was the first year in like 4 or 5 years where I didn't. I went all out last year with my Bad Bunny fit and the hair and everything, but this year we had the in-laws in town, so couldn't do
it. We did a couple partner costume, and I was Bob Ross, and my partner, she was the little tree, and it was a hit. Yeah, of course, my daughters and her friends, which is the main reason we throw our Halloween party, they were like, "Oh, nice costume, like the Afro look, cool." It's like they had no idea who I was, but hey, for the old heads like me, I think it hit the mark. So
I would have appreciated it.
I love that. All right, well, let's do good news stories. So if you've ever listened to the show, we start every episode the exact same way, and that's with what we call good news stories. We each share something that's happened in the last week or two. It could be work related, it could be personal, and we like to let our guests go first. So if you're ready, we'll let you get us started.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with something work related. And I was able to just roll out a new platform to our employees to better manage the disability disclosure and accommodation process. And actually got to do a webinar earlier in the week with the company, which is called DISCLO, and just kind of talk about how important it is. And it was just such a fun experience, and they've been really great partners. So I was really excited to be able to introduce it to our team last week.
Kudos. Congrats on that. We're going to have to circle back to that later in our conversation.
Yes, we will.
Steven, you want me to go next?
No, I got it. So hopefully, usually we have good news all written out, so I know in advance what Daniel's saying. So hopefully I'm not stealing your thunder or your good news, Daniel. My good news is work related. And for me now I've rolled off my contract for the company that acquired my startup. And so Modern People Leader, I'm like on a sabbatical. So that's my personal good news is I'm done with my contract. I'm on sabbatical. I'm figuring out my next move, talking to people. And it's just, I know I am very privileged to say this, but it has been fun becoming unemployed. And again, I want to reiterate, I know I am very privileged to be able to say that. And that's not the typical situation. And as part of that, I'm able to kind of lean in a little more on the modern people leader side. And so this week we got a verbal close on, and I hate even like I don't want to jinx it, but it's been a long time coming. So it looks like we will now like have our new largest contract to date, and it's 3x what we had done before, and that's really really exciting. What was our largest contract, and of course when you're starting with small amounts in revenue terms, it's easy to grow that, but it's exciting nonetheless. So that's my good news.
That's great news. And since you went work related, I'll go personal. This is probably the busiest week that I've had socially in a long time. So Tuesday we went trick or treating with my one of my wife's best friends, her husband, and their 10-month-old. I'm bad with little kids' ages. I think she's 10 months old. So it was really us doing the trick or treating and eating the candy because she can't even eat candy yet. And then Wednesday we went to John Mayer, which I'd never seen him before. That was a lot of fun. And then we went to another show last night. Then we have dinner with friends tonight. And then this weekend we have a wedding. So it's like the busiest we've been socially probably in months, which is kind of hard to beat because we're always pretty busy. But it's nice. It's nice uh catching up with friends that I haven't seen in a while and connecting. So it's been a good week. I just want to quickly shout out Adrian for even introducing us. Can you share like how you and Adrian know each other?
Yeah, so Adrian and I were connected through Resources for Humans, which
Okay.
is like an HR networking group. And they have a mentorship program that they run. I want to say it's twice a year. And I had previously participated and been assigned a mentee and really wanted a mentor because I know we're going to talk
Mm,
about this is my first time as an HR team of one, and not having a manager within HR was just such a strange transition for me. I was like, I need a mentor. And so earlier this year, Adrian and I were matched, and she was matched as my mentor. And one of the things that we had been talking about, and somehow I don't even know how she talked me into thinking that doing podcasts was a good idea, but I have her to thank not only for the introduction to the two of you, but also just for the courage to come onto a podcast and for convincing me that I had things that were like worth listening to.
oh, definitely. Yeah. So shout out to Adrian. I'm glad you're here. And now that you're here, we want to hear your story. So one of our recent guests, Vanessa Kotler, she was sharing with us how one of the questions that she asks her team is like, tell me your entire life story, which I love. I don't think that we'll have enough time to get into your entire life story today, but if you can give us like the abbreviated version of your life and career story and how that led you to primary and what you're doing today, we want to hear it.
Yeah, so I also kind of like that question, a more condensed version, but I feel like HR is just one of those careers that people come into from all different angles, so it's a very fun one. Mine was a pretty typical way that people get into HR, which was selling knives naturally. So I don't know if you've heard of Cutco. They Okay, I'm seeing a nod. So Cutco is a fantastic line of cutlery that recruits heavily from students. And so when I was in college, I sold knives one summer, happened to be somehow decent at it, and they let me run my own sales office as a college student through this like bizarre but really cool program that they have. And while I was very much confirmed in not liking sales and doing that, I did realize that I really liked things like training, onboarding, development, interviewing. And so I went back to my college career center and they introduced me to HR. And that's sort of how I got into HR. My first job out of grad school was at a rapidly growing e-commerce company called diapers.com, where I met Galen Bernard and Christina Carbonell, who went on to start Primary. But at the time, we did not know each other. I was entry level HR associate. They were probably at least VP level. So I was still basically figuring out what HR stood for, and they were doing amazing things for a great company. That company went on to be acquired by Amazon, and they left to go start Primary. And I moved across the country to do the exact opposite, which was go into HR in a manufacturing setting, which really made me realize how much I like startups because that was not for me. So I went back to the startup world where anyone who's worked in startup knows that once again we got acquired. And that one was a little bumpier on the HR side. So the whole HR team left. I hung on the longest, but ultimately left too and like needed a little me time, like all of us did post COVID. And once I was like ready to get back into the job search thing, I was living on LinkedIn and I saw one of the co-founders had posted that Primary had been featured in an Inc. article. And just, I don't even know why that day I decided to click on the article and read it. It was like, that actually sounds like a great company. How neat. So I went on their website and just fell in love with these like beautiful colors and just such a fun, playful website. And I thought, good for them, like doing big things. I wonder what they're hiring for. Clicked on it. They're looking for an HR person. And it just felt too perfect to not put my hat in the ring. And that was almost exactly 2 years ago. And that is how I became the HR director for Primary.
Wow. I want to go back to the summer that you sold knives.
Yeah.
Was this like door to door sales?
No, luckily it's
Okay.
not quite that nuts. So you start with like selling to friends and family, and then they're supposed to give you referrals and they're supposed to
Okay.
give you referrals. I happen to have a very big family, so I was able to stay in that realm for quite a while, which was good because once we got into calling referrals, that was when I was kind of like, yeah, not so much. What if we tried the management thing? But yeah, I spent that summer showing knives and cutting pennies for just about everybody I knew.
And would you say that those like sales skills that you built in that summer have been helpful in your career?
They definitely have, and I definitely didn't realize it at the time because it was so like I'm an introvert, and so just sales is not a natural fit for me at all. But certainly now that I'm doing a lot more recruiting than I have in past
Yeah.
jobs, that's a very big overlap. And just the skill of having to kind of compose yourself and call strangers, that was something very helpful to take with me into the tough conversations that come with HR. So I did inadvertently like just build a lot of these are scary things that I don't naturally like doing, but are important parts of HR. That was where I got the basis for that.
I describe myself as an accidental salesperson because like
Yes.
I don't want to sell really. I never intended to get involved in sales, but here we are and it turns out I'm pretty good at it. Like there's certain aspects that I'm better than others, but and I believe that everyone would benefit a little from being in a sales role. Just you just learn so much about yourself, about psychology, about working with
Yes.
others. It's just such a foundational skill to have.
It is. And it also really showed me the difference that it makes when you have a product that you believe in versus when you're just selling
Yes,
stuff. Because I
absolutely.
never felt like I was selling. And that was such a distinct difference in my mind. I was just showing people something that I thought was super cool. And I didn't feel like I needed any sales skills because I was just genuinely excited. And I think that that also has really translated into kind of how I approach HR. And certainly at Primary, it's been very different having product that I am really excited about. And I just recently made that connection. I always knew that at Cutco, I never felt like I was selling, but really seeing what that does in any sort of job when you're excited about the the company that you're working for and the product, it makes all the difference because it totally changes your relationship with what you're doing.
I feel like that's the perfect segue into the next question. So, how would you describe what primary does? Let's say you're at Thanksgiving with your family, and an older relative asks like what primary does.
Sure. And luckily, I would say primary is probably one of the easier things to describe than other jobs that I've had. It's an online kids clothing brand. It's all about soft, well-made basics in all of your favorite colors. One of the really big things, though, that separates primary is its focus on just kind of inclusion and separating colors by sizes and color, not by boys or girls. There are no goofy slogans or anything like that. So it's just meant to be very hand-me-down friendly, very like let kids be kids and dress themselves with clothing that mostly matches. It just kind of makes sense for parents.
And why should me and Steven be jealous that you get to work there?
I think one of the biggest things is that I'm off today and I was off last Friday and I will be off next Friday because primary has a 4-day work week. So we approach Fridays as just being flexible days for us. So you can use them how or if you need to. And that has really just been a game changer. The 4-day work week, I hope, will continue to catch on.
So over the last year and a half, at least the last year and a half, there's been no shortage of turbulence in the people space after a period of what felt like progress in some pretty important areas of HR. It feels like the pendulum has swung back in some pretty critical areas. This is exactly why we added this first segment to our show, which we call the State of the Union for HR. And and so I want to apply a slightly different lens to this conversation and focus on wellness, specifically what's the state of HR with respect to supporting those with disabilities. And so I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Oh, I wish I had happier answers to this question.
Mm.
I think that the entire topic around inclusion for employees with disabilities was largely overlooked in all of the really, really important DEIB work that's happened over the last couple of years. And unfortunately, to your point, that pendulum has swung back, and it seems like people are kind of growing fatigued of that. A lot of the DE&I roles that were created have been eliminated or not being backfilled. So there's already less focus as it is on diversity and inclusion efforts. And employees with disabilities were hardly even included at that. And now it just feels like there's even less momentum to have those conversations that never happened to begin with.
Geez, there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
But if we zoom out a bit, what were some of the positive impacts that COVID created or provided for people with disabilities?
The biggest one had to have been flexibility. And that was something that everybody benefited from. We just saw that people in so many different roles can successfully work from just about anywhere and that we don't even need to work synchronously. So all of our thoughts about how we worked were completely changing, and specifically for people with disabilities who may be managing quite a bit that goes along with their condition. That flexibility meant that they were able to manage these conditions at home instead of having to bring whatever is required to manage it to work with them. And just the ability to work remotely itself is so helpful for people with disabilities and not needing to have that be an accommodation that they had to request also gave people a lot more autonomy over how and if they even chose to disclose that they had a disability. If that was one of the main accommodations that they would have needed, whether they had asked for it in the past or not, now all of a sudden, everybody got that. And it just leveled the playing field. It wasn't I have to be othered because I have to request to work from home. We're all working from home. We're all doing our own thing in the background. And it really just created an environment that I think was ultimately so much more supportive for individuals who are managing, whether it's something that would be considered by the ADA definition a disability or any number of chronic illnesses that people may suffer from.
Wow, yeah, like this is a whole, to be honest, this is a bit of a blind spot for me. I think what felt clear to me during the pandemic was that there are a lot of disabilities that are invisible. Like you just can't
Yes.
see them and observe them,
Hmm.
but yet they're there, like issues with mental wellness.
Hmm.
And so that for me, that was like the main positive, and we all experience life and we move through work and through using our own lenses, and so like it's so obvious though that this would be like a the ability to work from home and not have to worry about everything that's involved with even getting to work, and then everything that's involved to actually do the work, and then you have to repeat that process of getting to work, going home, and streamlining that and just bringing that off the table so that people could focus on work. I can see that being like a game changer. And so what are some of the things that at least you've heard maybe from other peers that have changed post pandemic, like things that were available? Like I think one thing is that people have been asked to come back to the office, right? Are there any other? Are you seeing any other changes that companies are making that are negatively impacting the progress we made?
That's definitely the biggest specific example. And the the thing that frustrates me so much about that is we are, more than 3 years past the point of when people went remote, and companies are still changing the game on their employees. And that needs to be talked about more because people have moved, people's family situations have changed. So much has happened in 3 years. For companies to just snap their fingers and try to bring us back to 2019 is so unfair to their employees. And I've just this week alone talked to several candidates whose job basically became eliminated because their company reinstated an in-office policy after saying that they wouldn't, and these employees had moved. And so like it really isn't just about people with disabilities, but that's a very specific example. But I think one of the more kind of just problematic trends that I've seen is this distrust of employees almost. I was involved in an HR executive networking call for HR leaders in the Southern California area where I'm based over the summer. And to listen to so many people that I would have considered my peers going back to talking about how it's, these entitled young people and nobody wants to work. And I'm like, it was just so stunning to hear people who I thought were so tuned into what employees were saying being so far off the mark that it really isn't just about the fact that companies are trying to bring people back into the office. There's been such a strange shift in just how some employers seem to be changing how they look at their employees in general. That's just very strange.
So,
I go ahead, Daniel.
oh no, no, I wanted to quickly circle back on something that Stephen briefly mentioned, how one of his biggest takeaways is that a lot of disabilities that people have are invisible. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, like what, like if we were to zoom out, how many people are even affected by disabilities in the US? Like in my mind, it's probably not nearly as many people as it actually is. And then I guess the follow up to that, like what are some of these disabilities that we wouldn't even necessarily think of?
Yeah, so it kind of depends exactly how you want to define disability or condition or anything like that. On a conservative estimate, it's 1 in 4 employees has a disability as defined by the ADA who would be entitled to accommodations. But
Wow.
per the CDC, 60% of adults are living with some sort of chronic illness, 4 in 10 having more than one. So it's not
60, 60?
60, 6 in
Wow.
10 adults. So it's not a matter of if you have employees with disabilities at your company. You absolutely have anywhere from 25 to 60% of your employees having some sort of complicated medical condition in their life. And I think a lot of people are still waiting for somebody to show up for an interview who needs a wheelchair or some sort of extensive mobility assistance or these big obvious disabilities. But that's just not what we're looking at. So I think that there has been some good talk about neurodiversity, and this would include things such as any sort of autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, and neurodiversity, really referring to just differences in how basic brain functioning occurs. So, not even necessarily a disability, but things that change the way that somebody's brain works, that the way that we've structured the world of work is just tougher for them. And it doesn't need to be, but because their brain just works a little bit differently, these are people who would be entitled to accommodations. You had mentioned sort of mental wellness, anxiety is way up since COVID. I mean, that was always something, but just very statistically significantly higher. You have an increase in complications resulting from COVID, including what has now been called long COVID, which causes very significant complications. I actually have a friend who developed long COVID early last year and still is significantly impaired in his ability to work. And you wouldn't know it by looking at him. And there's all of these different ways that somebody can be suffering from. It could be autoimmune disorder, it could be a digestive problem. There are just so many things that could go wrong in our bodies that require some sort of assistance to make us able to exist somewhat in the world.
The interesting thing is, like, I do feel like the conversation has continued around this topic. And I see on LinkedIn, at least in my feed, I see people sharing having issues with suicidal ideation, with insert mental wellness challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And like before COVID, like that, you just to your professional network would never have put something like that out there. And so it feels like the conversation is still happening. So that's a positive, but yet companies seem like they are not willing to provide the support or investing in this segment of their workforce. Would
And
you
I
agree
don't,
with that? Maybe
yes.
not
And
all, but just like in it, if we look at the macro, like pendulum swinging back, like is that a fair conclusion to draw?
I think it is, and not necessarily maliciously.
Yeah.
I think companies still really see disability and disability accommodation as a compliance issue and not as an
Mm.
inclusion issue. And that is where I really think the conversation needs to shift, because it is not about waiting again for somebody to like knock on HR's door and request that accommodation. Those employees are already in your workforce, and if they are not coming to you, it means that they are going to their manager, which is already creating problems, or they're just trying to manage it on their own, which helps nobody. So to the extent that the conversations are happening, they're still, I think, falling on deaf ears.
Yeah.
And there is still a lot of stigma around disability. So even for people to go on LinkedIn and talk about it, there's still constant fear of backlash. I have experienced it in the past, and I think a lot of people, unfortunately, have stories readily available of times that they thought that they were in a safe space to disclose something like that that has turned around to completely bite them. So there's some range of just completely not thinking about it to paying lip service to it, but doing the opposite to more maliciously trying to avoid it as much as possible.
Yeah, and we definitely want to get to your personal journey because I think you have a powerful story to share. But before we get there, I think it's safe to say that we're not going to get clarity on the whole return to office remote working thing. We're still
No.
waiting, and we're so tired of talking about it, Daniel and I. But it's still a conversation that the debate carries on.
Mhm.
And so the reality is like we may have to get creative in the immediate to short term around helping those with disabilities in the workplace. And so I'm just curious, like how can companies, HR practitioners, how can we be more supportive, knowing that there are going to be some limits to what we can provide our employees with disabilities, but like what are some of the creative ways that you are seeing companies or maybe some of the programs that you've implemented at primary, like any examples you can provide on things that other companies can do?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is to make sure that your accommodation policy is not just like a quick little blurb buried somewhere in your handbook, but really making sure that that's something that all of your employees know about and know where it exists. Maybe it's putting a link on your intranet that just says click here, or has the accommodation blurb with a button that generates an email to HR, just some way to make it really easy for people. And to put that also right at the beginning of your interview process too, and understand that you are going to be talking to candidates who have disabilities. So you need to be thinking about this through all stages of your employee life cycle. And there are now some resources out there for proactively putting some support in place to help people who have some of the more common conditions that people struggle with. So something that I've started doing that I'm just trying to like spread the word and make happen, this is a default I know in Gmail. I'm not sure about Outlook because it's been a minute since I've had a company on Outlook, but at least with Gmail, you can choose to have your default be that your meetings end early. So an hour-long meeting ends at the 50-minute mark, and a half-hour meeting ends 5 minutes early. And what this does for the general population is allows us to like fill up our water, use the bathroom, get a snack, all these things that we used to do on our way from conference room to conference room that we've like forgotten about. But for employees who may be managing some sort of a health condition or something like that, it gives them time to get medication, to stretch their body, to give their mind a break, to stare at something other than a screen, to prepare for their next meeting, to do any number of things that just subtly make life so much easier for them. And that's just one of those little things that like helps so many people. Another one, I think, being we've sort of fallen away from how to have good meetings, but have a meeting agenda and send meeting notes. Those can help so many people, and also just good practice. So I think within HR, we can kind of just look at some of the norms that we have within our company and see how we can clean things up a little bit and just put some good habits in place that are going to help everybody, but that will really proactively make life a little bit better for people who are managing disabilities.
So interesting. Daniel, like 2 days ago, we were debating, well, not really debating, but we were kind of having like a history lesson. And we do this a lot, Daniel and I, because I've been in the workforce and in HR, in the HR space for a lot longer. And so Daniel was just asking me, like, how you keep talking about the employee experience as a product, like managing your employee experience like you would manage your product. And he was just asking me, like, how did companies do this in the past? Like, how would they have done this? And I was like, well, first of all, it would have been a huge initiative. It would have been like a massive, like, quarterly annual goal. You would have looked at your employee life cycle, the hire to fire process. And again, this is like the old school way, right? And in the flaw. And so he was asking, like, what are some of the pros? What are some of the cons of doing that? And the big con is that not every employee follows that same happy path. So the employee life cycle view only is really looking at the happy path. And there's so many different use cases or employee types or categories that are being lost, or you're not going to support the best way that you can. And so there's this like new way of thinking, which is called the employee journey map. And so, and by not just focusing on the employee lifecycle, but broadening and considering like a journey map. And in this map, you could have different categories of employees. You start to open up, awareness to areas where you're not providing adequate support. Does that mean you're going to be able to solve all of those problems? No, but then you can then create a backlog, prioritize your backlog, or at a minimum, if improving accommodation for employees with disabilities is a priority, then we can like pull one or two of these backlog items into kind of the goals for the HR team. And as you were, it was almost as though like you were like referencing something like that to better position your company to support your disabled employees rather than just looking at kind of the happy path. Is it? I don't know if that resonates at all with you, but that's immediately what came to mind for me.
That does, and I love that verbiage, and that's definitely something that I'm going to be incorporating into my own vocabulary. But it also is very consistent with how I've been talking to managers lately about thinking about their teams and getting them to kind of let go of some of the older frameworks of even just kind of a straight career path up and looking at more of a lattice approach and what are the different opportunities laterally and just cross functionally. And I think that that really mixes in with this idea of creating a bigger web of the employee experience and not just lists and checklists and all of these different straight lines that we used to use.
Yes.
So when we had our prep call, I guess 2 months ago now, you shared your personal journey with your own disability.
Mhm.
And if you're comfortable, um, I guess first off, like, would you be comfortable sharing this? Okay.
Yes,
Um,
I am very transparent about it and will be like providing little lessons along the way too. My relationship with disability goes very far back. I spent most of middle school and high school going through pretty significant surgeries. And without knowing the words, I have needed accommodations since middle school. I also, despite all of this, never felt disabled enough to speak up on behalf of employees with disabilities. I didn't even know if I should check that box on the application form to describe myself as having a disability, despite knowing full well that I looked at that list. I'm like, oh, yeah, I have three of those and have absolutely asked for like these things. I was just like, no. Um, so I kind of like hid from it, slash, just didn't really know what my relationship with it was. Cut to this summer when my body just started to hurt more and more and more. And again, I've had a lot of surgeries. Like I know about pain. And but man, was this like just something I couldn't get past. And it continued to get worse until my functionality went down to nearly zero. And Daniel, that was about when you and I met. And I had to go back at the notes because I was in so much pain at that point that I didn't even
wow.
hardly remember our conversation.
I couldn't even tell.
Because
That is,
I I only had a few hours that you could even call good hours that I was stringing together. I was like trying to like cobble together some work in that point. And around this time was when I figured out that I have fibromyalgia. And it was another about 7 weeks until I was able to get in to see a doctor to confirm my diagnosis that I not only do I have fibromyalgia, if there's a way that you have a lot of fibromyalgia, I have all of the fibromyalgia. So I was in this very strange position of I needed so much because I could barely work, but because I'm remote, I don't meet FMLA eligibility requirements. I hadn't yet seen a doctor, so I had no way that I could have applied for state or even company offered short-term disability. So I would say anybody listening who has fallen through any of the gaping holes in the social safety nets in this country knows like how scary and vulnerable that is to begin with. But then to have to go to your employer and say, like, I'm not able to do the job that you hired me to do is its own level of terrifying. Add on to that, I am HR. I didn't have HR to go to. So I had to go to my managers, who happen to be the people who run the company, and explain every detail about like the medical problems that I was experiencing, put my HR hat back on, try to tell them what I recommended for myself because as much as I had gone through the accommodation process in my own head, that doesn't work so well when you actually need somebody to approve this. So it was just this really really overwhelming period of uncertainty. With fibromyalgia, a lot of people are not able to successfully navigate the working world because they can't find the flexibility that they need. And I knew that there was a reality that I would not be able to continue working because of what was happening. And there was a lot on the line, and a lot was going to depend on how the co founders of Primary reacted to me telling them I can't work and I don't know what to do.
and if again, if you're comfortable sharing, like, what was the I mean, obviously you're still there, so I'm guessing it was a good response, but what was the initial reaction? And I guess what have you learned
Um,
from this entire experience?
so the initial reaction was as sympathetic and empathetic as I could have ever asked for. I was I was so upset and so nervous, and they felt awful and just wanted to know, what do you need? And I would say, like, those are the most powerful words that you can say to your employees, whether or not they're coming to you in the kind of distress that I was. But they asked me what I needed. And I was like, well, I explained realistically, I need time off, I think. And we kind of just worked through where I was at and kind of arrived at do the best you can, which went through a lot of different phases while I was getting on some medication, which luckily I was able to start before I had actually seen the doctor. I had a different doctor who was managing some of that for me. So I had told them this, and I said, we're like really increasing this dose slowly, and this is kind of the time frame I'm looking at. And it was nearly 2 months that I was working. I'll call it part time, but for some of that, as I mentioned, I had maybe 2 good hours a day to do anything productive, including like brushing my teeth and washing myself was included in this bucket of time of being productive, plus whatever like emails I could get through. And then slowly I was able to kind of extend that more and more. Certainly having flexible Fridays really did help because I could better manage my time. And it is something that I still fall back on now because even though I've kind of gotten some of my pain more under control, there is so many different pieces of this that I have to manage. But they asked what I needed. I told them and they said, okay, like let's keep having conversations about this and take care of yourself. And I kind of couldn't believe it because they could have reacted in about 2,500 different ways that would have not looked like that and would have meant you and I would have been having a conversation with me not as the HR director of primary. And it was like, if you want to know how to boost an employee's engagement, like helping them through arguably one of the worst times of their life is a surefire way to do it because I am just working in a whole different zone than I have ever worked before. And that's with a really tricky chronic illness that impacts my life in very big ways. I'm still so engaged and just pushing all the way forward because they accommodated me.
I feel like this whole episode could be a good news story.
For real. For
Which,
real.
It really could.
yeah, and going back to the good news story. So I think you said that you ran like a webinar and like, was it disability disclosure?
Yeah,
Was that
so
all inspired from this experience?
it was.
Okay.
So my experience having to disclose my disability really opened my eyes to that process because I thought because of all of my medical problems in the past that like of course I'm going to be so good at the disability accommodation thing. And I wrote such a nice little blurb in our handbook. I really did. I wrote it by hand. I didn't use a boilerplate one. I really thought you could like feel the tone come through. And only one person has ever come to me requesting an accommodation, and it was because of an injury, and it was a very short-term need and a small ask. And that's when it clicked with me that people weren't asking because that process is scary, and it does not matter how nice my statement is in the handbook. So I was completely committed to immediately figuring out a better way to do it, and I had no idea what that looked like. I happened to like within about this all happened in about a 4 day span of me figuring out that I had fibromyalgia, needing to disclose this to my managers slash co-founders and ask for this wild set of accommodations despite having absolutely no diagnosis in sight. I was contacted on LinkedIn for like the billionth time that day, but it was from a company called DISCLO. And I looked them up, and it is a disability and accommodation platform. And I was like, stop it. So I like very eagerly set up a call and just, if nothing else, I just wanted to absorb information and see how I could learn. Once I saw the Disclo platform and saw how they take all of the disclosure out of the company, and you talk to somebody at another company in a very HIPAA compliant and very safe manner, and then your company only knows what sort of accommodation you may need. They don't know your diagnosis. They don't know the medical specifics that I ended up disclosing to people who have control over my performance review and salary increases. And I just saw the power of this. And I knew immediately I will fight hard to get this. And I don't ask for much. I know that my budget this year was zero. And I think that I have worked very creatively within my $0 budget. But I knew that this was something important to ask for. And I told Disclo that I have no budget. And they worked with me to set up a plan to start payment next year because they were excited. I was excited. I brought my excitement to the co-founders. And once again, I didn't have to sell them because the excitement just came through. And I put the compliance hat on for a minute, but it didn't even matter. Like I just knew that I will continue to ask for this until they say yes. And I didn't have to. To my delight, once again, I proposed this and they were just like, yeah, I think that makes sense. And I was like, okay, yes, I will run with this. And it's really just become such a fun partnership already, even though we just rolled this out last week to primary. And it was just because all of this happened in the same time that, like, I happen to be in HR, I'm struggling with a pretty major disability, and want nobody else to go through what I went through. So I was actually able to participate in a LinkedIn Live webinar on Tuesday to round out National Disability Employment Awareness Month, or NDEAM, to talk about it was called Stories and Strategies of Inclusion, and it just featured two DISCLO customers who had some sort of experience accommodating employees with disabilities and having success with the DISCLO platform. And it's something that I'm now so excited about and will talk about to anybody who will listen, including obviously the two of you and your audiences, but not just about this. I am also trying to educate anybody that I can about fibromyalgia, because unfortunately, this is one of the diseases that still has such a weird, cruel stigma attached to it, to the extent that a lot of doctors don't know about it. Medical professionals don't even still believe that it's real. And the explanations that patients are getting from their doctors that their pain is fake, that it's in their head, is just completely bizarre, because it's a very real condition that affects your nervous system and affects many, many body systems. So I've now just really been on this inspiration of I am now disabled enough. Like I was before, but I really am now. And I saw these concerns and I had these frustrations about disability not being included in these DEI conversations. I didn't know how to insert myself in the conversation though, and now I'm trying to figure that out.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that story with us. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of comfort in being vulnerable to have these kinds of conversations. Both Daniel and I have talked about our struggles with mental wellness in the past, and it is while it's extremely scary, I believe it's really a cathartic exercise, and the negative talk in my head goes away a little bit by bit, the more I'm open and I can share my experience, strength, and hope. And so thank you for sharing that story with us today. And second, what's the name of this platform that you keep mentioning? Like how do we find that platform if I'm interested?
Yeah, so the platform is called DISCLO, as in short for disclosure, DISCLO. They also have a sister company that I want to shout out called Chronically Capable, and it's a job board specifically for employees who have disabilities, and employers who post jobs on there are specifically committed to disability inclusion in their employment. So those are both really great resources, even for HR teams who can't bring on either one of the platforms. Disclo has a ton of free resources on their website for how to adjust your processes, how to look through your handbook, how to manage employees with various disabilities. I know I've seen ADHD, autism, arthritis, diabetes, anxiety. They have a whole range of common conditions that even just an interested manager could go look at and just get ideas for what their team might be going through and some little things that they can do. So I have just been singing their praise to anybody and everybody because it's such a cool thing that they're doing.
Yeah, we'll definitely check it out and
And
we'll
also,
learn
like,
more.
everybody that I've met from Disclo is absolutely fantastic, and they're just all completely wonderful people.
We live and breathe this, and so when there's a new provider or vendor that we hear about, it's like, huh, I've never heard that. It's just amazing the amount of innovation that's happening within our space every
It
single day.
is. And
And so
usually I'm like, we have enough HR systems, like, let's consolidate. But in this case, I say bring these systems in.
bring it on, bring it
Yeah,
on. And so this conversation isn't the only form of courage that you've had to display in your current job. The other one that we want to quickly talk about before we wrap up, because we are getting close, is operating as an HR team of one. That requires a ton of courage. And I believe this is not only your first time as an HR director, but it's your first time being an HR team of one. Is that right?
that is correct.
And so, what has this experience been like so far?
It's been pretty wild. Um, there is just truly nothing that compares to doing HR by yourself. I have always worked on a team that had, at a minimum, your head of HR, a recruiter, and somebody doing all of the rest of the HR ops stuff. And I was always the person doing the HR ops stuff, which is a lot of hats as it is. I never really realized how many more hats could actually be placed on my head until I was a team of one, when, oh, now I have to figure out, like, not only recruiting, which I've done interviews, I've screened, but I've never put together a recruiting process. I've never had to completely own and teach on an applicant tracking system. I've never put together HR strategy. I've never been like the sole person talking to managers. So there were just all of these new things that I had to learn how to do really fast without anybody else to bounce ideas off of. So it was very intimidating, but has also been a lot of fun.
And so I love this stuff. I'm a student of the process. I like to geek out on the details. And so
Yes.
we don't have time for all that, unfortunately. But if you can just in summary format, like what was walk us through the process of being the first HR person, establishing an agenda for the new people function. Walk us through what that process was like through to where you are now, and maybe a little look forward, like what's coming next for you.
Sure. So the first thing that I like to do in general when I come into a company is do sort of a compliance check, just to give me a little bit of a lay of the land of, like, do we have any like really big problems we need to address? And the first thing that I saw was no handbook. So I was like, okay, that's project number one. Like, there are just certain things, it's like going through files. Where are there potentially really big red flags? And then it's looking at processes. And so I started doing that as well, which I always like to use my own onboarding as a gauge of what the onboarding situation is at a company. So I knew that I had some focus that I wanted to do in there. Recruiting pretty quickly came onto my plate. And so I had to sort of come up with a process that made sense, given that we didn't have a recruiter but needed to have something on paper. Performance management, it existed, but we didn't necessarily have something written down. We didn't have consistency. So it was taking the things that were already happening and just kind of collecting them and writing them down. Those were some of the big first steps. And then we started to get to add in some of the more fun initiatives of some of the culture stuff, and partnering and getting some manager training in place and some kind of manager one-on-ones, and having now, I am established as the go-to. We have our process in place. I have good rapport with my managers. So now what I'm really looking forward to is going back and starting at the very beginning and, like, going back through our handbook. So now it's been 2 years, and now I have a new framework that I want to look at it through, which is part of this new disability framework, but just a general employee inclusion, like really making sure that every word in that handbook is exactly the way that I want it. I want to go back through our processes now and make sure that we're doing it the right way and not just a way, but in a really good way. We started a culture club over the summer, which I'm very excited about because I've been wanting to do this since I joined. And like primary already had a lot of really good bones in terms of HR structure. There was a great culture already. There were already so many good like perks and benefits and policies. And so asking who wants to raise their hand and like help us plan fun things was a moment that I had waited for a year and a half. And now that we get to start doing that, I am really excited to see what we can kind of start adding into the mix next year. So even though it took a while to get to this point of actually being able to be a little bit more strategic and a little bit more value add, this is where I think every day is sort of just this incremental addition of what I get to do to help employees.
And I'm not sure if you guys have done your 2024 strategic review or goal, the planning process. Sometimes
Mhm.
companies have already started. Some companies like to wait. They want the recency effect of doing that like right before the year starts. But as we look forward, like what are, and is there anything that you have earmarked as like your really exciting, interesting initiatives for next year?
Well, because I am on a really big disability inclusion push right now, I do want to put in some best practices to support, especially neurodiverse employees with some of the things that I had mentioned before, just meeting agendas and meeting minutes and shortening meetings and things that I think are really going to create benefits and make people's life easier and make their work better. But I'm also really excited to spend some time on Primary's employer branding, which has not had any time devoted to it. And it's such a fun brand in the customer space. And I think that there are just so many great overlaps with what we do as a company and with what our brand promotes. This is not a part of my brain that like naturally clicks really fast. So I'm very excited to work with the very creative people like on our content team. Our design team recently made some gorgeous core value icons that I want to build an entire website around. So I have like some pretty big project ideas for like somebody who has very little time for projects, but I'm very excited for my project list already for next year. We're still a little bit out for that. Obviously, like a retail company, our biggest really impact to our bottom line is yet to come. So I don't know, and I won't probably until the end of January if I like what my budget looks like or any of that, but the wheels are already turning and I'm so used to working with little to no money that I'm like, I can run with this if I need to for pretty
And then
little.
if surprise, surprise, you have an actual budget, you're like, what?
I won't have a
Like,
problem putting it to use. Let's just say that.
exactly, exactly.
I'm taking a look at the website right now, and I'm excited for you to have some more resources and to start working on like the employer brand because y'all have an amazing external brand already.
Yeah, and I really think that our career page is going to look so great once we're able to put something together and get some team pictures up there and get these core value icons out there. So it'll be worth the wait, I think.
Well, whenever these changes go into effect, you'll have to send us an email and say, "Hey, go check out the careers page and all the work that we're doing."
Yes, and then I'll come back on and we can talk through it.
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect.
I wish we could keep talking about employer branding, but as we always do, and as we mentioned before the call, before we hit record, we have made it a habit to go over on these calls, and we did it again. So the last portion of the episode is what we call rapid fire questions. So we ask the same three questions to every guest, and yeah, we'll get started. So question one: how do you define a modern people leader? What are the traits and characteristics?
So I recently saw a word that I am just very much in love with, which is a disruptor. Um, I think right now it's so important more than ever for HR people to not be content with the status quo. Somebody who is not afraid to loudly advocate for their employees and who can think outside of the box, even more so in the past, because HR's role has just changed so much.
That's a good one, disruptor. All right. Question two. If you could go back in time and talk to a 22-year-old you, what career advice would you give yourself and why?
I have two things that I would tell myself. 22-year-old me thought that I needed a master's degree. So, first of all, I would tell me that I don't need those extra student loans. But related to my career, I would tell me to speak up to get exposure to as many different parts of HR as early as possible. Shadowing interviews, sitting in on strategy sessions, things that would have been way above what I had any responsibility for. And I did get involved with a lot, but really asking to see it all so that this moment that I'm in now, I would have had something to draw back on and be like, oh, I do remember that first time I did XYZ. So those are the two things that I would tell myself.
That's a good tip. All right, last one. Is there anything that you believe to be true about the world of work, but don't yet have the data to support?
This one, like there might be data out there, but I don't know it. So I'm going to say that there's no data. People don't not want to work. Was that the right number of negatives?
It made
I
sense to
think you
me.
nailed it. I think you nailed it.
Yeah.
Yes. I I this is just one of those things that I don't think it's that people don't want to work. People have just seen that work doesn't need to be their entire identity, and they just want a little bit of a shift.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think when the right combination of factors are in place, people want to work. They will pour their heart and souls into work if it makes sense.
Mhm.
But the days of like everything being ruled by work are over. And that is one trend that I struggled with hard, and I'm on
Mhm.
board. I'm on board. Life's too short, and there's too much other stuff that's really, really important.
Yeah, and
And
I think we're starting to see which companies are falling on which side of the control line. And this is the other thing I don't have any data to back up, but I think the companies that are on the side of fighting to retain the old ways of having control are going to start losing the talent battles.
yes, and yeah, we could have a show on that as well. So, but unfortunately, my job at this point is to get us to the finish line, and we're almost there. We have two remaining, one question and one ritual left to go. And similar to how we were able to get you onto this show, and this has been an amazing conversation, and it's just I don't know why I continue to be surprised 150 plus episodes in, but I do. It's just such a cool thing that we have here. And I'm grateful that you were willing to join us. But we would only have this if we had recommendations. And so the next question is, if there's one or two people, maybe more, that you think have to be heard in the world of HR or the people space, who would those individuals be?
I would say if you are looking for somebody who knows so much about the experience of employees with disabilities and has done so much work kind of in the advocacy space, Julie Harris is a fantastic resource, has so many insightful things to say on LinkedIn, and was one of kind of the first people I started following as kind of a disability advocate. And is somebody that I just immensely look up to because of how courageous she is in telling her story. And Kat Kibbins is in the recruiting space and really just has kind of a no nonsense approach to how to fix job postings, how to fix LinkedIn profiles, how to like cut some of the garbage out of your recruiting process. And they're just also one of the funniest people that I've ever heard present. So I think they would both be fantastic guests for you.
Love it. Love it. And we would be honored. So we'll definitely reach out. And that gets us to our final ritual. We like to wrap up every conversation we have on the Modern People Leader with what we call one word or phrase close. So it can be a few words. We all respond with a word or a few from the episode that we want to close with. And we like for our guests to go first. So we can buy some time if you need it. Otherwise, we'll let you kick us off.
Embrace flexibility.
Love that. Daniel?
Oh, I'm struggling. I'm gonna go with be a disruptor.
I'm going to go with challenge yourself. I think we all need to challenge I need to challenge myself because every time I have a blind spot, it's just like, wow, how could I have had that blind spot? And so I think it's good to challenge myself and challenge the way I'm looking at the world. And so this conversation certainly has done that. And I can't thank you enough, Jodie, for joining us, for being courageous, for being vulnerable, and just being an all around amazing guest. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great chatting with you both.
All right. I think that's it for today. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We wanna know what you think about the show. And yeah, you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. So thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.